Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
I have a short conversation about spiritual practices in general. We've heard about the fly fishing aspect. You can see the passion and joy in the man. That's what I want out of all of our spiritual practices for us, right? Now, I will first acknowledge that the word spiritual is imprecise and overused and probably makes at least a few of us in this room break out in hives. I try to use spiritual sort of as a secondhand for ultimacy, the three great questions: where do we come from, what happens after we die, and why are we here in the first place? What should we be doing while we're here? And I choose to translate that as, how can I speak and act to participate in the creation of more truth, more goodness, more authenticity, more beauty, more joy, and more satisfaction in my life and in the lives of others? Regular spiritual practice can help with lots of that. Now, there are practices which seem obviously spiritual: prayer, meditation, fasting, chanting. And there are practices which are less obviously spiritual, but still provide such benefits: knitting, quilting, jogging, gardening, journaling, painting, singing, fly fishing. None of these are guaranteed to work. But there is some intention in it to bring about more joy, to be life-enhancing. And I think that intention is key. I know many people with a deep prayer practice that helps their life immensely, and I think some of those televangelists shouting prayers are not doing anything remotely spiritual. I think outcomes are part of this. Does the practice change us over time? Do we find more joy, more peace, more patience in the world because of what we've been doing? Now, the experience of the practice itself, sometimes it feels like a chore. Sometimes it can be pleasant and slightly restorative. Once in a while, it can be so engrossing that we lose track of time. More on that one in a bit. And sometimes practice is a parachute that provides a respite from a difficult day or rescues us from the overwhelm of the news and Facebook. Regular practice can provide comfort, the experience of a familiar, safe state, and those ritual actions that help bring that experience to us. Come home after a difficult day at work and do your practice and feel better. Get up early when you know there's something happening at work that day and do your practice and prepare for it. As a regular practice, to just continue making that space and that ritual so it's there someday when you need it. The analogy I use is like pouring a cup of water on the fire around you. One cup of water may not do a ton for you, but day in and day out, those cups of water do bring down the local temperature, and over a few years can make a significant difference. Sometimes just the reminder that we can pour a cup of water when we need to brings us a sense of agency and the confidence to face whatever difficulty is testing us this time. And if that were the only type of spiritual practice, that would probably be sufficient. But wait, there's more. There can be this other deeper experience, more powerful experience. How many of us have become so engrossed in an activity or a practice you didn't notice how much time had passed? Lots of us, right? Deeply engaged, fully focused. Things are going so well, it's almost like we've become one with that activity. Athletes and other high achievers sometimes call this being in the zone. Psychologists call it flow. Named by the Hungarian psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, In 1975, the flow state, Csikszentmihalyi writes, virtually everyone has experienced flow at some point. That feeling of complete absorption in an activity, engaged and fulfilled, exercising a skill at a high level, during which temporal concerns, time, food, ego self, go unnoticed. Flow is usually considered a good thing, pleasurable and life-enriching in itself. There can be a downside. The experience of flow can be addictive. This is most easily observed in video games these days, which are completely immersive. They require your full attention to do well. It's a difficult challenge. You're right at the limits of your abilities. That's a really good thing. That sense of flow is lovely, and you can become unmotivated to do anything else. So that's a real caveat. Csikszentmihalyi writes, the flow experience, like everything else, is not good in an absolute sense. It is good only that it has the potential to make life more rich, intense, and meaningful. It is good because it increases the strengths and complexity of the self. But whether the consequence of any particular instance of flow is good in a larger sense needs to be discussed and evaluated. With that caveat, flow is generally considered to be life-enhancing. And here are some of the ways that people talk about flow. Action and awareness merge. You and what you're doing become one. Your actions feel automatic and require little or no additional resources. Selflessness, your sense of self disappears. Self-consciousness falls away, and the inner critic is silenced. Timelessness, you experience an altered perception of time. Past and future disappear as you enter the deep now. Effortlessness, your sense of struggle and frustration vanishes. Intrinsic motivation. The experience is autotelic. That's also pronounced autotelic, I'm told, on the Google site. It means the activity has a purpose in itself. The activity or work becomes its own reward, and that is, I think, the level 5 that Jim talked about in fishing. You're just happy to be there. The experience is reward itself. Flow is like a regular spiritual practice, only much more so. Continuing the analogy of a spiritual practice being pouring cups of water on the fires of daily challenges, time in flow is bringing a super squirter and doing gallons of water at once. Flow is harder to achieve. The consistency of a regular practice is part of its benefit. Regular practice and flow states help reinforce each other. And so I really truly believe that everything Jim talks about is a spiritual practice, that he is a happier person, that his life is enhanced by what he does. And bringing that out to the rest of the congregation and the folks online, if you have a regular spiritual practice, however you defined all of those terms, then take a moment of appreciation for the past you who started and continued that practice, and maybe think about deepening it or cultivating a new one. If you have a lapsed practice, consider resuming it or finding another one which fits your life circumstance better. Jim says he's not proselytizing, but if you really think that fly fishing might be a thing for you, I'll bet if you talk to him afterwards, you might wrangle an invitation. The best time to start a spiritual practice is years ago. The second best time to start a spiritual practice is today. It is hard to work a daily practice into our busy lives. That difficulty is part of it. Doing that difficult thing somewhat regularly can produce a sense of satisfaction and self-confidence. It's the opposite of a participation trophy. If we practice regularly and long enough, if we're fortunate enough to experience flow once in a while, we are likely to be more happy, more patient, more grounded, and more confident, not because we tried to become that, but because we practiced this one thing. so may we be. This congregation